thank you all for joining. I know it's been a lot of content. We had lunch and everything, so appreciate you coming in and listening to us speak. So we're going to talk about going through the change today, and this is all about the business engagement that is required to make Skype for Business really successful within an organisation, and also the user adoption strategy that you're going to take, and really less about the technology and more about how you engage with the organisation. So I'm Justin Morris. I'm joined by Don Kerr. And so I'll just talk a little bit about who we are to start with before we get stuck in. So I'm a Skype for Business MVP, 3 years on the row now, and also the country manager here in Australia for Modality Systems. And we're the world's largest dedicated Skype for Business practice. We help our customers on their whole journey to universal communications, from strategy through to development and support. I also co-founded the Sydney UC user group here in Sydney, and those run quarterly at Microsoft. So if you are interested in the community, check that out and come along. And Don?
Do you guys want to reset the timer for us? Because otherwise we could probably go for 2 hours and then...
Yeah, good point.
Don Kerr, I work in the enterprise business group for Plantronics, working with customers around their unified communications deployments, but also manage our strategic alliance here in Australia with Microsoft. Plantronics, as we had an unpaid promo from David from Cardinia, we are a headset vendor. We provide audio endpoints. We've got about 5.2, 5.3 million optimised for Link. Actually, I better pull my wallet out and put $2 in. Optimised for Link devices deployed globally. We're a Microsoft Gold partner and very strategically aligned with them. But I'm also an employee inside of Plantronics, and we're a Skype for Business customer too.
Awesome. So in terms of what we cover in this session, there's 4 key themes. The first is user adoption, business engagement, and then user adoption. And then we'll talk about personas and device strategy, and then round everything up with measuring success. And so the way we'll do it is that Don and I will kind of vibe off each other, and I'll share some success stories we've had in Modality, and then Don will cover off the stories that he has at Plantronics. So the first thing, business and user engagement. What we see with our customers in Modality, both based here in Australia and worldwide, customers of all various shapes and sizes in different industries, is that it's really important to do this first and foremost during your rollout approach. So rather than taking a very technology-based approach to Skype for Business, start approaching people in the organisation very early on to get their buy-in and demonstrate the value to them and what it means to them. Because everybody's selfish when it comes to change. You can't just throw another app out in front of somebody and expect them to just say, oh, it's another app from IT, I better just start using it. Because when it's something as culturally significant as Skype for Business, people really need to be bought into that, and they need to say, okay, I'll see the productivity enhancements from this, or I'll see how it opens up more ways of working for me. So it's really important to demonstrate that and then secure buy-in from those stakeholders. So that's everything from your manager right up to the MD or CEO. So they see value in, yep, this is a strategic direction for us, and we're going to absolutely get some benefit out of it. And then that follows into identifying champions within lines of business. And this is an opportunity to really identify a cross-section across the organisation of people in HR, finance, sales, everywhere that say, maybe a bit more tech savvy, and you can get on board for Skype for Business and will really become your advocates outside of throughout the organisation and fly the flag for you. When you're sort of sitting within the program and the project management aspect, those guys can really beat the drum for you. And then even though you do that user and business engagement during the initial phase, repeat that throughout the entire project so that you continually get that feedback and you can sort of understand how things are going, and that you reiterate that message that you're trying to deliver value to the organisation. So with it, Don, what have you seen at Plantronics?
Yes, certainly inside of Plantronics, and it's interesting following on from Heath and David in their session about activity-based working. Inside of Plantronics, it was a holistic transformation for us to a collaborative work environment, what internally we call smarter working. And that involved both the layout of our office environment, what we call the bricks, the technology element, the bytes, and also a behaviour element. So how people worked and how that cultural transformation was leveraged through. And at that end, getting the executives to buy into that holistic transformation to smarter working was really critical. and for them to see that it was actually a business transformation and there was business benefit coming out of this. A key example for us early on in the Link 2013 deployment was actually out of our finance department. Once they got the benefit of desktop sharing and stopped emailing spreadsheets for forecast reviews and performance reviews, the CFO went, we want this. This needs to happen because it's driving benefit inside of finance. And suddenly the CFO was on board, the CIO had another supporter, and so it rolled through to kind of quell the skeptics inside of the executive team. And the point Justin made about that continual feedback loop, that became really critical coming up through the lines of business into the environment itself. To the extent now when we, as a technology partner with Microsoft, understood the time frame of the move to Skype for Business, our CEO was, I see the benefit for our business as Plantronics on actually being on the cutting edge. So let's move with it. And it was just the bytes, Pete, it was the technology component because the layout, the bricks was in place, the behaviours was continually being transformed, and Skype for Business just became a technology enabler for us moving forward.
Awesome, great. So with business and user engagement, what we can then transition into is how you focus on your user adoption strategy. And we find this is really important within organisations where we traditionally engage within IT, is it's important to develop a stream there around engaging the organisation and the cultural change that's going to occur with Skype for Business and universal communications. So absolutely make sure that you don't leave this to the end. Don't let it become something that once you've completed the project and the infrastructure's built or the tenant's lit up in Skype for Business online that you think, oh, we better think about training, because then by that time you're potentially introducing a significant delay between when the environment's ready and when you actually get it into the hands of users and they're being effective with the software. So start really early and understand what the user adoption strategy looks like. The key thing to remember here is that it's not just training, it's actually a holistic approach that needs to identify how people actually learn and then how they actually adopt to change as well. So when it does come to training, make sure you tailor that to people's demographic and how they learn. Are they somebody that can consume training in a webinar type environment, or are they more akin to classroom? Or are they somebody that wants self-service type training, based on a video they can go to SharePoint or from within Skype for Business itself and consume that training video? And then in terms of key stakeholders to engage, make sure you get the exec and admin staff involved in the training and user adoption strategy. Because we were talking about this in the activity hub earlier around executive assistants to exec teams. They have very unique training requirements around call handling and delegation. So make sure you spend the time with those people so they're very comfortable with using Skype for Business. And so, Don, in terms of user adoption, what have you guys seen at Plantronics?
Yeah, I'll touch on the cultural transition first. I mentioned this smarter working approach, if you like, philosophy that pervades inside of Plantronics now. At a cultural element from a meeting perspective, we now have a set of training and policies around what we call smarter meetings. So inside of Plantronics, if you're going to organise a meeting, it has to be a link meeting. For our people in head office, they have to have it in a video-enabled room. And from a behaviour perspective, the driver is that it finishes 5 minutes before the advertised time of finish. Doesn't always happen, but that's the objective. So that's driving the behaviours and the culture. So now if I get a meeting request and it's not a Skype for Business enabled meeting, I'm not going to accept it. I'm going to wait until someone does that. So from a cultural perspective, understand how that fits together. In terms of training and support, we've got 4 generations inside of Plantronics. Our baby boomers definitely wanted face-to-face classroom training, and so IT provided that. The millennials who are coming in, and we fight for talent on the edge of Silicon Valley with the likes of Google, etc. They don't want that. They want self-help. I want to go in, I want to learn it myself at my own time, at my own pace. So IT had to provide that spread of different training material for us. And for us, Plantronics Australia down here in the field, we actually wanted that as well. So I could sit in my home office and just learn and understand what's new, how to use it, and how to make the most of it. But the point around using a community, we leverage social in the enterprise quite strategically, putting up there all of the training materials into our social platform, but also enabling users to answer other users' questions. So, how do I actually make sure my headset's configured correctly in the Skype for Business client? Well, there's a couple of hundred employees inside of Plantronics who can answer that. It doesn't have to go to the help desk. So leverage your social platform for those sort of elements. And then finally, from an adoption perspective, you'll see there Tom Gill on the left is our CIO. This is a Skype for Business call I had with him and his team in the lead up to this session. And Rick is our lead IT guy for our communications platform. They took the call that they were going to turn everything on inside of Skype for Business and pre that Link 2013. IM, chat, collab, meetings, voice, video. Just turn it all on and let the users come and consume whatever they're going to consume from it. And that actually drove a lot of adoption for them. So it wasn't a we'll do IM, then we'll do conferencing, then we'll look at do voice, and then we'll do video. They just turned it all on, and that helped to accelerate user adoption for us.
Great. Yeah, and just touching on the support element there as well, it's really important to provide great go-live support when it comes to rolling out Skype for Business so that people have that ability to put up their hand, ask a question, and not suffer in silence. So this is things like floor walking and giving people a lot of different ways to get in touch with experts to get the support they need. I need to set up call forwarding, or I'm not sure on how to schedule a meeting. So addressing those things really early on ensures that you have people very well enabled for usage.
Yeah, the other element that our team took, and Justin referred to the exec and admin staff there, they made sure they actually got the EAs in each division on board, because they were the communication conduit back to IT of actually what was going on inside of that department. Because there will be staff who won't log a help desk call, but they'll complain to the EA about it. So they were a key point, training them, getting them ready to support, and also to be an escalation point.
Definitely.
All right, so I'll take the lead on this one. The other element that both inside of Plantronics as we work on our own organisation and as we work with customers, that we've often seen as being a blocker or a hindrance to deployment of UC inside of environments is how they plan for the user personas and the device adoption. And it was interesting hearing David talk about how they went through at Cardinia the planning for what the audio endpoint was going to be, but also that unique little group that had been used to having a corded headset rather than a wireless one, and the challenge that that presented. So from that, and with some research that we performed across 3,000 enterprise customers, US and Europe, inside of Plantronics, we've now built this model of personas inside of an organisation, which you see on the right there. And so we work internally, and we also work with customers around understanding the persona of your user base. Where do they communicate from, and how intensely do they communicate? And out of that, we've pulled together 5 core personas that you can see on the screen there. So as an example, your connected manager is someone at a executive or management level who travels a lot, but they're in your office locations. So they will always be inside of your network, but it may be Sydney today, it might be Singapore next week, it might be Melbourne the week after. Through to someone like myself who's a road warrior, who spends very little time in an office, but they're on the road, they're in an airport lounge, they're at a customer site. So just map your employees into that, and then look at what their communication requirements are and what style of end device, both from a voice and a video perspective, they're going to need. And build that in early in your planning phase. Because certainly we see customers that have challenges of adoption and whose Link or Skype for Business projects now face hurdles are those who leave this to the very end. And they go, my goodness, we're about to move into our new building in 2 weeks, we better think about what the end audio device is. 9 times out of 10, that's going to be an abject failure. So align this also then to your training. We talked about demographics, but align your training to the different persona types, because someone who's on the road probably going to need to know a bit more about use of the client off a mobile device or with a Bluetooth device than someone who's a desk worker who's always at the same desk all the time. And also there's supporting documentation inside of Microsoft's own Rapid Adoption and Success Kit, the RASK, that includes a device planning phase in the 10 strategic steps for deploying Skype for Business. So there's some resources there as well, but more than welcome for you to come and chat to us on our stand out there and we can help guide you through that as well. So Justin, in your engagement with customers, what have you seen around being a couple of points that have helped them succeed around persona and device planning, and maybe one gotcha that you've seen as well?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the focus on training and support with the persona definition is really important, and what we'll do with our customers when they're doing their rollout planning is help them identify what those profiles look like within their organisation. So if they're a legal firm, looking at who are the lawyers, who are the paralegals, who are the admin staff, who are the partners, and then how those people actually work within the organisation, whether that's in the office, on the road, inside customers. And then once you understand what those profiles look like, depending on the type of the organisation, you can then start to map those devices to that person. And that lends really well to the personas that Don's put on there, where, say if you've got a lawyer that is very mobile, then a good device capability for them would be a Bluetooth headset and maybe a speakerphone, so they can join conferences while they're out on the road. And then that flows through nicely into catering the training for the type of devices that user persona has. So make sure you do all this kind of thing really upfront, and you do spend enough time and energy in making sure you do get it right. And the other thing that we've had a lot of success with customers is setting up like a model office within their environment. So carving out a meeting room and setting up some PCs, laptops, mobile devices with different devices. So decked headsets, Bluetooth headsets, wired headsets, speakerphones, IP phones, the whole lot. And then allow people to come through from the business and then test out and then see what they feel is best for them. And then from that, you can gather that feedback and then start to define a device approach as well. Excellent. So from that, we're going to talk a bit now about measuring success. So this is really all about after you've sort of ended the rollout and you need to report back into the business and to the organisation about how successful your Skype for Business rollout's actually going. So those first two there are really about the financial aspects of measuring success. At the very start of your rollout, you would have said to the organisation, here's how long it's going to take to see return on investment. You need to go into your environment and say, okay, we've spent X number of dollars on this project. What are the cost savings that we've seen as a result of that, and how long did it take us to get there? An important way of building on that is focusing on getting feedback from employees as well. So that's going out into the business and speaking to people directly, or by sending out a survey and saying, do you love Link? There's $2 for me. So, and what else could we do better for you in Skype for Business? And did you know you could use this particular Skype for Business feature? And making statements like, with Skype for Business, I am more productive in my way of working. Strongly agree, disagree, those kind of things. And then with that, you can take that kind of hard feedback back to the CFO and the CIO and say, yes, our staff are actually seeing benefit out of this based on the real world feedback. And when it comes to that feedback, you'll get some success stories that come back from people where there'll be a group of people in the organisation that tell you, yep, we used to find it hard to be able to collaborate across distances. If the team is spread throughout Melbourne, Sydney and Brisbane and they needed to come together regularly and there weren't the tools before Skype for Business to be able to do that. If that team says to you, look, we are so much more intertwined now, we can collaborate so much better with Skype for Business, make sure you grab that success story and market the hell out of it. Because there's nothing better in an organisation than saying, here's actually colleagues that inside our organisation that have benefited from this. You could take a leaf out of their book and adapt it to how you work as well. Because that's just a word of mouth kind of thing that's actually just going to boost that adoption throughout the organisation. And then lastly, in terms of measuring utilisation, have a look at the IT Pro tools that are out there in the market now of like Event Zero and Nectar, because they're the ones that you're going to be able to look at your utilisation within Skype for Business and determine, are people scheduling and joining conferences? Are they using desktop sharing? How many people are using Federation, and to which organisations is that occurring? Because that allows you to gather up that data and then work out, okay, do we need to spend some time on communication around Federation or desktop sharing? Because there's things within Skype for Business that some people don't really know that work, but when they do know it works, it can become a silver bullet for them when they just, they get it and they go, oh, this is amazing, this is the best thing since sliced bread, and then they'll just go out to the organisation and tell everybody about how incredible it is. So Don, in terms of measuring success, what have you guys seen at Plantronics?
Yeah, so it's interesting, a couple of success stories I think. Earlier on I referred to the finance department, just suddenly getting the value of desktop sharing. And that became a story that spread around the organisation. And someone from finance would tell someone out of marketing and they tried it, and it just helped to, if you like, virally grow the deployment of Link at that point in time. And a second one, just as a personal story around this, just this week working with a customer, and the project manager for their global deployment is in London. They happen to be on Link 2013 as well. I had an email from him wanting to connect up. The time zone's not kind between Sydney and London at the moment, right? But being able to pull his presence up out of an email and see that it was online and available, and to escalate that straight to a voice call saved me having to do a mobile international call, so it saved the business some money there, but also got response right at that point in time. So I take that just as an individual user as a great success. Overall, inside of Plantronics, we've measured two things. So in discussions with Tom and Rick and Ira, I've got some of the data back from them, both from the IT tools, so actual utilisation, and then the surveys that we've put in place. And we actually continue now, that survey is a continual loop, so that the executive, and it comes back to exec support, are continually getting feedback on perception of Link, now Skype for Business, inside of Plantronics. So if you want to go to the next slide for me, Justin.
Sure.
So these are some of the usage statistics. So the IT Pro tools on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, the survey results, and then down the bottom right-hand corner I'll talk to just as we get towards the end. So from a usage statistics, as we deployed Link 2013, and I'm going to be up for about $100 by the end of this session, we measured instant messaging, we measured voice calls, and we measured application and desktop sharing. They were the three elements that inside of Plantronics we actually took metrics on. So you can see there, of the usage inside of the organisation, between 81% and 97% of users are using instant messaging. This is from the March timeframe. Very high adoption rates, and going back to the execs who may be sceptical about will people adopt this, those figures answer the question for themselves. Users who are making calls, so enterprise voice, pure voice calls over Link, 84% of the sales organisation are using it for voice. Now we're out on the road, yet we're using mobiles a lot, but we are also making a lot of calls out of now the Skype for Business client, through up into 96% from the marketing and the G&A team. So again, there's some evidence, hard statistical evidence back to the executive of what's happening. And the application desktop sharing varies by departments. So our operations department, the guys that are looking after the factory and order management and pushing product out the door for us, it's reasonably low. But marketing, the product managers, etc., up to 60% usage of application and desktop sharing. So that all becomes just metrics for us back into how our users are actually taking advantage of the technology. So on average, for across the, I think it's about 2,700 employees now across the globe for Plantronics, the average user, if you can take that, I don't know that there is one, but if you can take that, the average user is sending 30 IMs a week, making 11 calls and doing one desktop sharing session. And that's just raw metrics for our business to look at. But then from a user survey perspective, of a survey that went out in the March timeframe, these are the responses that came back. 70% or more of all voice calls are made using Link. So a survey going out, how many calls do you make using Link or Skype for Business a day? 70% of respondents said their voice calls are going over that platform. Interestingly, out of the 620 odd people that responded, there's only 25 that are not using it for voice. So that not using percentage is very, very small for us. And then from a perception perspective, Justin commented about sending a survey out. Do you like or dislike Link? So 82% of our survey respondents agreed or strongly agreed to the statement, I like Link. So from a user perception inside of Plantronics, a really strong story. All of that helped to drive the business case for our organisation moving rapidly and deploying Skype for Business. Okay, so that's the bottom right-hand corner there. On the day of general release of the Skype for Business client, it was made available for self-install inside of Plantronics. It was a 3-week window that you could self-install before the period of a push-out from IT came. And there were, you see there, 530 users across the globe chose to self-install the Skype for Business client. Quite a high uptake if you think of it, of people just going, downloading a new client and getting it going. And then by the 19th of May, we were globally Skype for Business client customer. Our server deployment will be complete this month. Rick and Ira, who you saw on the screen before, are in train of making that happen at the moment. And so we'll be able to stand in front of you next month and say, we're a full Skype for Business house. If you kind of want to hear what the gotchas are, I'm sure any of you want to connect up with Tom or Rick or Ira, happy to do some introductions for you. The one interesting element in all of that I encourage you is to get HR involved in the measurement and feedback loop. Because it's an interesting little anecdote with Ira. So here's our key Link system admin guy, Skype for Business admin guy. We're based in Santa Cruz in California, just up near San Francisco. In February, his wife got a job in Sacramento, so down LA way. He came into Tom and Rick and said, my wife's got this great job, I've got to move down to Southern California, I'm going to have to leave. And Tom and Rick said to him, no you don't, just set up your home office, you're still an employee with Plantronics, you're highly valued, you will be online and available and can work from that location. And I didn't even know that when I was on the call with them 2 weeks ago talking about this. So it's become a staff retention tool for us. Our staff attrition, so the number of staff that are leaving, has dropped from 13% to 3.2%. A really significant saving for our organisation that HR can report back on. So there's some of the findings from Plantronics as an organisation.
Excellent, yeah, and we have a similar story in Modality actually, where one of our staff members, his wife is recently giving birth, and we said, look, you can go and do your job from home in Western Sydney, don't come into the CBD, support your wife through that process. And so he just worked from home, had his paternity leave, and then he was back on board using Skype for Business, supporting our customers as he normally would. So that's kind of that flexibility that comes with the platform that can keep those people on board and happy. So with that, we'll wrap up with some key learning points here that we'll touch on. So the first one is absolutely engage those business stakeholders early and often. So get the MD involved, tell him how Skype for Business is going to deliver on enhanced sales and productivity, and then repeat that message all throughout that rollout. And secondly, absolutely make sure you define your adoption strategy as a key part of the rollout. Don't just fall into the trap of focusing on the technology and the IT aspects of Skype for Business of, how many load balancers do I need and what ports do I need open through the firewall. Make sure you engage the right change management people or bring somebody in to help you out with that to work out how do our people learn, how do they adopt to change, what sort of devices do we need, how are they going to require training.
And then make sure you're measuring both your business results and the user feedback. So that survey element along with the IT Pro tools, and join those together and get them as the feedback loop into your business and to the executive. And make sure you're not just planning support for the day of deployment. Make sure it becomes an ongoing and continual loop of feedback into IT so that you're morphing and transforming the support you're offering as the technology adoption grows inside of your organisation.
Cool. And if you've got any questions on what we've talked about in the session, feel free to come and talk to Don or I in the Plantronics or Modality stand out in the Activity Hub.
Yep. And with that, we're going to hand over to Jace, who's going to introduce the next session for you. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you.